Welcome to Connections Live, our webinar series designed to help you deepen your sense of interconnection, to inform and inspire. And thank you for tuning in from all around the world, from many different time zones, wherever you are, to hear our special guest, ion scientist, Dr. Arnaud Delorme, who will be discussing the nature of consciousness. So just a little topic for our Friday. We're going to have a wonderful presentation. And before we jump into Arnaud's presentation, we have some incredibly exciting news and announcements. So you all are the very first to hear about it. And it ties into our topic of expanding our scientific understanding of the nature of consciousness. So we are thrilled to announce the establishment of the Linda G. O'Brien Noetic Sciences Research Prize. And we are profoundly grateful to ION's board member and longtime supporter, Linda G. O'Brien, for her generosity in establishing this visionary science prize. So before we get started in our talk, we'll let Linda introduce the prize herself. And so in just a moment, we'll have a video of Linda to share a little bit about what this prize is, and then Arnold will be talking about how it ties into the nature of consciousness. So here in just a moment, we'll get the video up. There it is.
I'm thrilled to introduce ION's board member and longtime donor, Linda O'Brien, to share her special, exciting announcement with us all.
I'm here today as a board member, a longtime donor, and chair of the IONS Development Committee. With the recent sale of IONS campus, we are now able to seed its first multi-million-dollar endowment. This will help to provide financial security for IONS in many generations to come. As we head into our 50th anniversary, IONS is a solid nonprofit. During COVID, scientific research accelerated and experiential programming participants quadrupled, with ION's sole purpose being of service to humanity and our planet. I have been thoughtfully reviewing this past year and contemplating, what do I want my legacy to be? And today I am delighted to announce that I have established the Linda G. O'Brien Noetic Sciences Research Prize. This annual prize of $100,000 is designed to provide IONS worldwide visibility. The prize will be given to an external individual or team who has proven research to advance leading-edge science around consciousness. It is my hope that this prize will yield discovery, and as my dear friend and mentor Mary Morrissey said to me, what if one of those ideas could change the world? I genuinely believe that together we can open both the financial and energetic pathways to a flourishing planet that embraces our interconnection with all. Thank you, and thank you for your support of IONS.
Great. So we are very excited, as you can tell, to be announcing this award that will be given to a research team and will advance leading edge science and around consciousness. We will have applications open in January 2023. We're going to put a link in the chat so you can read a little bit more about the prize. And of course, Arnold will be talking about it a little bit as well today, as he's helping lead the prize as well. So much more information on that in the follow-up email and to come, but you all are definitely the first to hear about that special announcement. So really excited about that. And let me go ahead and introduce Arnaud. And before he steps onto our online stage, I'd love to read a short bio for him, for those of you who don't know him yet. So Dr. Arnaud Delorme is the CNRS principal investigator in Toulouse, France, a faculty member of the University of California, San Diego, and a scientist here at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He is a longtime Zen meditator and has taught in India on the neural correlates of conscious experience in a master's degree program for the Birla Institute of Technology. He is the author of over 160 peer-reviewed publications and is best known for developing the EEG software that is now most used in EEG research worldwide. And Arnaud's work on mediumship is of particular interest, even with the mainstream. His paper on evidential mediumship and the brain activity of mediums is among the top 1% of articles viewed on ResearchGate platforms. That is pretty impressive, and backed by research that spans over a decade, Arnaud has made a compelling argument that the topic of mediumship is worthy of scientific investigation. So I'm sure we'll be hearing a little bit more about that today. And Arnaud, it is such a pleasure to have you back on Connections Live, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for the nice introduction. It's so nice to be here. So let me share my screen. And so today the topic is Big C consciousness. And so that's about Linda's prize. And we like to call it Big C as opposition to little c, and you'll see why in a second. So this presentation is about what is this prize about, and why did she set up this prize, and what does it mean for ions? And first I'm going to start with this slide, which is a lot of people think, oh, there's no urgency. You know, I mean, we'll be here for millions of years, etc. We'll see how humanity evolved over this time period. But I personally think there is some urgency right now. And this is based on what's called in science and physics called the anthropomorphic principle, which is that we are all very special, but as a species, we might not be very special. So if we assume we're not very special, what is the more likely? So on one hand, right here, there is 300 billion people will ever live, and we're about right here. So there is about 8 billion people on Earth. Total over the whole humanity for a million years, there's been 117 billion. So, you know, about 10% are alive right now. So what is more likely? Is this more likely? So this is the rise of the number of people and the fall of the number of people. Or is this more likely? You know, like we'll live for millions of years and we are right here at the very, very beginning. And most people were like, well, it's much more likely, you know, we're in the middle because we're not special. So, you know, here we would be very special. We would be at the very, very beginning of humanity. Here, we are not special. So that's what's called the anthropomorphic principle. And if we're not special, in all likelihood, humanity will just the number of people will decrease, and basically human will disappear within a couple of 100 to 1,000 years. So now it's a very important time. And this is not written in stone right here, even if we believe in this anthropomorphic principle, because what we can do is that we can change what's called a reference class. So right now we're in the reference class of humans, developed humans, but we can change reference class and become a new type of human. And then, for example, you know, a type of human that doesn't do war or has completely changed their belief system. And if that's the case, then we're in a new reference class. So it's like a new species. And then we start our own new curve, which can have a complete different dynamics than the one we're in right now. So this is just mainstream science. Here, it's not impossible. We're right here, but it's much more likely we're right here. So we got to do something. We got to move to this new class of humans, change basically our reference class so humanity can thrive for potentially millions of years and not extinguish within a couple of thousands or 100 years. So with this little introduction and the fact that it is urgent time right now, let's look at the difference between little c consciousness and big C consciousness. And these are just words we put onto these are not actual definition in the dictionary. This is how we define it. So little c consciousness is the consciousness of neuroscience, the brain as a machine. So Marvin Minsky, a famous philosopher, said, "You're a machine made of meat." Or Francis Crick, one of the discoverer of the DNA, said, "You're nothing but a pack of neurons." And it makes some sense intuitively, because, well, a lot of what we do, a lot of our what our visual system does in terms of recognizing objects and predicting of the environment is very similar to what machines do. Also, in terms of games, games of chess, games of Go, we can see that our brain works very much like machines do in terms of predicting what's the best next move. So there's obviously some truth to that. And the idea is that complex behavior emerges from simple rules. So if you set some rules, like for example, the rule of chess, of how the pieces move, then you can have very complex games at the highest level based on these simple rules. So that's the same idea for basically any type of human behavior. There might be very, very simple rules, the way our brain works, and this can lead to very complex behavior. The main hypothesis for little c is that our brain does what's called predictive coding. Predictive coding is we're trying to predict our environment and act accordingly. So we have a schema of our environment. So when something happens, we compare to our model, we try to predict what's next, and we act accordingly. So that's seeing the brain as a predictive machine. And I want to also mention there was some recent hype in the medias about AI being conscious. I don't know if you've seen that. So there was a new Google model that's called Lambda, and one of the technicians says, "Oh, Lambda is conscious. We can't really keep it in the computer, etc." That's so. If you've seen that, that's actually most experts don't believe that's the case at all. Most experts believe that the computer model is just a computer model at this stage. It's not conscious at all. And that brings us to big C, because, you know, what's the difference between the model, the AI model, Lambda, that can do incredible things? If you chat with it, you would probably think it's a real human, because it is, the response are so timely and accurate that you would probably think you're chatting with a real human, but you're not. You're chatting with a computer model. So what's the difference with our consciousness? What's the big C consciousness? And that's called, other people have called that the hard problem of consciousness. This was a philosopher, David Chalmers, who coined this term in the 1990s. And basically the hard problem of consciousness is about trying to explain why we feel what we feel. Basically the feeling of being. How can this arise from, if our brain is a computer, how can this arise from just a computer? It doesn't seem possible. And that's what we call the hard problem of consciousness. And so that's what the prize is about. The prize is about showing that we're more than machine, and trying to make way into, probably not solve, but, you know, make way into the hard problem of consciousness, explaining how we feel, and explaining why we are more than machines, and see how you can do science on that. And so here I want to lower a little bit expectations. Are we going to really solve the hard problem of consciousness? Probably not. But even if the brain as a machine is the dominant paradigm right now, if you look at one of the Nature, so there's several journals in science which are the most prestigious, and Nature is the most prestigious journal in science. And in 2018, they made the list of the most the biggest question in science. So what is dark matter, and what is consciousness as well? So even though the main idea is that from scientists is that we're a machine, there's still some unsolved among these scientists, like what is consciousness? How can consciousness emerge from purely mechanical interaction? Here at IONS, we don't believe that's necessarily possible. We believe there is needed a change of paradigm, but even there is a change of paradigm, we can still do science on it. And we also don't believe that it's going to be a slam dunk. Oh, we're going to find an answer and we're going to be done. It's probably going to be very convoluted path. And if we can just make a little headway along that path, I think this is already going to be a great contribution to humanity. So that's the realistic expectation, is that we're here and we might get right here. So so in this diagram, so we explain the different possibilities. So you, as your brain, are you your brain? If yes, that's the mainstream hypothesis, and no, which is our hypothesis, then you have different hypotheses. Consciousness can be epiphenomenon, meaning that epiphenomenon, meaning that the brain is a machine and consciousness just arises from that, but it doesn't have any causal influence. So consciousness cannot act on the world. And in that case, there's an absence of free will. So the brain, with its activity, would give rise to consciousness, the feeling of being, but the feeling of being doesn't have, it's not because you think, oh, I'm going to take this glass of water, that you actually your thought actually caused you to take the glass of water. It might just be that you believe that your thoughts will lead you to take the glass of water. In other words, your brain decides to take the glass of water. You take the glass of water, and then at the same time you have the thought, I want to take the glass of water. And then the idea is that you convince yourself that it is you who had the thought, while in fact the thought just arose in your brain. And that's, I would say, what most neuroscientists believe right now. So neuroscientists believe right now is that consciousness is an epiphenomenon, which means just is a rise from brain activity. It is completely contained within the brain, but there is an absence of free will. You just believe that you do things, you don't actually do them. The alternative hypothesis is that our consciousness can have causal influence in the world, meaning that it doesn't mean that everything we think of, we initiated the thoughts. I mean, very often we're in the environment, we hear a bird, and then we think about our childhood, or, the thoughts are initiated by external events. But sometimes when we make a decision, it is us who actually make the decision. The decision comes from within and not from the brain. So our consciousness, our feeling of being can have a causal influence in the world. Our feeling of being can actually have changed the what we call the material world. So that's where we stand with this big C context with Linda's. Can we show that? Can we show that this is the case here, that we are more than our brain or not? So, and then if we're more than our brain, there's also two possible solutions. Either psi is real, and in that case, consciousness would probably be seen as a fundamental property of nature. If you can influence an object at the distance, not only it shows that your consciousness is not contained in your brain, but it's also show that it has non-local influence in the world. So that would demonstrate right away that consciousness is more than your brain, that you're more than your brain, or that's not necessarily the case. You can have consciousness still have a causal influence. Like, for example, you can imagine, I like to imagine the brain as a container, like a particle accelerator that just contains this field of consciousness. And the field of consciousness could just have interaction with neurons in the brain while still being more than the brain. But psi might not necessarily be real. So that's another question, is if consciousness can have a causal influence on the world, is psi real or not? There's still the choice that psi is possible or psi is not possible. Basically, in the if psi is not possible, it would just be psi is only possible within the containment of the brain, in the sense that the consciousness field or your sense of being can influence neurons in the brain in a non-local way, if you want. And I want to, for those of you who think, oh, well, this is completely this is not aligned with what science says, and it's true, it's not really aligned with what science says right now. There's some very weird thing happening in the current scientific model, and quantum mechanics is one of them. Quantum mechanics tells you non-localities everywhere. State can propagate faster than the speed of light, they can teleport, etc. So if we look at the current model of science, and not just the current model of the science the world we interact with, there's a lot of weird thing in science. So it wouldn't be necessarily weirder that consciousness is a property of the world and that psi is real. Mostly because there's a lot of other weird stuff we don't understand in the world, quantum mechanics being one of them. In quantum mechanics, matter doesn't exist. You just have a swarm of probabilities, and physicists are still pulling their hair about what's happening, how to interpret the equations of quantum mechanics. And the very well-known agreement they came to, I think in 1929 in Copenhagen, is that they all agree to shut up and calculate and not try to interpret quantum mechanics. And even to these days, it's taboo for physicists to try to interpret what quantum mechanics mean. The main accepted hypothesis is the multiverse hypothesis, in which you're going to have a universe splitting into billions of universe every second. And so this is accepted by most physicists. This is the most accepted theory. So we're right here, and could there be, could we have something to do with the rest of nature? Can consciousness have something to do with the rest of nature? And this all comes to first person experience. So if you want to study big C, you have to take into account first person experience. So this is so how do we know that it is true or not? So there's different levels, and we've written a paper on that which we just published in the Frontier journals, is that there's different levels of evidence. So you have anecdotes, like a twin breaking his arm in one country and the other twin feeling that at the same time. And that would show non-locality of consciousness. You have case studies. And in this case, a scientist will go and do some research and document everything, for example, about the twin. You have also laboratory experiments where you invite people in the laboratory, so you could, and you do experiments of telepathy. So that's what we do. You have planned experiments in which you can do it. You can plan it in advance and also pre-register it. So you can say all the data acquisition you're going to do and all the analysis you're going to do. So that's more rigorous than just running an experiment in the lab. You also have independently replicated experiments. If one lab shows it, it's great if 10 other labs shows it in the world and they can all agree on the results. Then you have systematic reviews, meta-analysis, where you just pull the data together. And finally, you have applications. If you can build a protocol or a machine that shows telepathy, you can communicate with telepathy, then you don't have any ambiguity that this phenomena is real. And in our paper, we reviewed different level of evidence. We reviewed strong evidence, good evidence, suggestive evidence, conflicting evidence, poor evidence, and no evidence. So we look at different studies and different topics about Big C. For example, is telepathy real? And we look at the evidence. So we reviewed the studies and we showed, well, did we have independent replicated experiments? Did we have any analysis? Is there any applications? So that's one way in which you can judge the quality of the evidence. And just to give you here, just look at the strong one and no evidence. So a strong one, strong evidence would be we have objective data samples. We have what we call retrospective and prospective study. It's blinded in the sense that you ask people in telepathy experiments, for example, people will be in different rooms. They might not know who they're communicating to, etc. And also it's been replicated by different groups. And it's not explainable by current understanding of materialist science, etc. So, and also, you can have naturalistic real-time observation, meaning that if you want to reproduce it, you can just set it up and you can observe it in real time. So this is extremely strong evidence. On the other end of the spectrum, you have zero evidence, in which whatever reports are systematic frauds or obvious documented and undocumented flaws. And so, so we've written a paper and we've looked at all the different levels of evidence for different side effects associated with Big C. And we found that most of the time we're lying between here, C, and B. So we're not yet at A. And that's what the contest is about. It's like, what can we do? Can we design experiment where we can get this level of evidence for side effect? We prove that consciousness is more than the brain. It's an hypothesis. So what kind of evidence do we have right now? First, I'm going to show you some evidence that's not even controversial, and we are completely coupled with our environment. This is actually a recent paper from 2021 that shows that a women's menstrual cycle is synchronized with moon phases. And it took that long. So it's only in 2021 that scientists were able to show that. Here you see 337, this is the statistics on 337 women. So our physiology is synchronized with the environment around us. Also, our body can sense the Earth magnetic field. And again, that's not controversial anymore. This was published in the mainstream paper in a couple of years ago, 2019, and it shows that we can sense beyond reasonable doubt the magnetic field around us. So we can use it like pigeon would use the Earth magnetic field, for example, to orient themselves. We probably don't have that level of capacity, but we can still have some sense of the Earth magnetic field. Or also, our body is sensitive to solar activity. So scientists have shown that if you have more sunspots, the level of stress of people increases, and you can measure the level of stress in what we call the HRV, which is the heart rhythm. So when the heart becomes more regular, it means you're more stressed. And when there's more sunspots, you can see that about 40 hours later, and that's time to how long it takes for some of the radiation from the sun to arrive on Earth, and shows that this affects the heart rate variability. And this is also coupled with the Earth magnetic field, because when there is more solar activity, the Earth magnetic field is influenced. And since we're sensitive to the Earth magnetic field, we're influenced by the solar activity. So this is no more controversial. Now I'm going to show you some of the more controversial studies we do at IONS, and which will still require more replication from the scientific community. But basically here, this is a study we did with about 1,200 meditators. We asked them about their experience during meditation. More than half said that they had experienced at least once clairvoyance and telepathy during their meditation, or a connection with a guru, non-local connection with a guru, or communication with non-physical entities. So this is a common, at least among meditators, this is a common experience, even though a lot of them, they just experience it once. They don't experience it in all their meditation. And it doesn't mean that it's real, it just means that most people report these kind of experiments. I personally myself studied mediumship and channeling, and Elaine also is studying channeling at IONS. And one of the reasons to study channeling is that if you want to show that consciousness can have a non-local effect on the world, that's like the low-hanging fruit. First, there's mediums and psychics everywhere. You go to any small town, you're going to find a psychic or a medium. In comparison to psychics, mediums are relatively easy to test because they just want to convince you they're in contact with your deceased relative. Also, it involves extreme emotions. And if you look at all the reports which have been done, whenever there's extreme emotions, like a death of a loved one, is when usually side effects are present, or people sense something. They also were previous publications, and here the hypothesis, at least when I was doing these studies, the hypothesis is simple, is not to show that there is survival of consciousness after a death, although we do have also some research project on that. But here for this specific one, it was just, there's something abnormal going on. It could be telepathy between the client and the medium. It could be survival of consciousness. It could be anything. We're interested in showing there is something abnormal that's not currently explained by science. And we did this series of experiments in which we recorded people's EEG, and we asked people to determine, so they saw pictures and they had to decide, is this person has a heart attack, car accidents, or was it a death by firearm? And they have to press button to indicate which of these. And here you can imagine doing yourself the experiments, and I'm going to show quickly 3 pictures. One of them died of a heart attack, one of them died of a car accident, one of them died by firearm. Usually we do a poll among participants, but we won't have time to do that today. But so this is the first person, this is the second person, and this is the third person. And so this is, when you do these experiments, you would do something similar. Then you have to decide, okay, which of the person, so this is how they died, basically. And when we do this experiment, we try to balance the smile of people. So we don't have more people smiling in one condition than the others. We don't have, like for heart attack, we don't have all people who are overweight because they have a higher likelihood of heart attack. So we control for all these effects. And when we did this in mediums and non-mediums. We observe odds against chance, which means we observe a low probability that this would be due by chance. So people were able to respond above chance. And you see there's only less than 2% chance that this would be just due to random fluctuation. Just people responding well just by chance. So it's unlikely. It's not impossible. We also observe some brain activity, and this paper is available on our website. Basically, brain activity between mediums and controls, where we found some difference, and we published that in the mainstream journal Brain and Cognition. And we've published many other research report on this. And I think I'm out of time. We also have our website GotSci, where we try to recruit talents to do all these sci tasks. So you can go to this website, it's called .sci.org or sciarcade.org, and you will help us determine if people can do these tasks. So remote viewing, so these are all sci tasks above chance expectation. And I'm going to skip that part. So so this is the paper we published, and you're welcome to go look at it. That kind of summarize all the remarks made in this presentation. What if consciousness is more than an emergent property of the brain? And this is really what this Big C contest is about. And we're very grateful for Linda to set that up and to provide these funds to set up this prize. We have a jury of scientists. We're going to accept applications in 2 stages, and it's going to start in January, next January, and in which people will first do a very simple application that's not too long, and then we are going to invite the best ones for a longer application, and then award the prize at the IONS conference in June. So thank you for your attention, and Andrea, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Arnaud, for that overview and beginning to open up all these different theories of consciousness and where IONS is helping to take this research, both with your own research and the prize larger into the world. So thank you so much. And I'm excited that we have some time for questions. There's already some questions coming on in. So if you'd like to ask a question to Arnaud, go ahead and just put it directly into the Q&A box and we'll just get started. So we've got a question from John who says, is it possible that consciousness is a cosmic energy, something like the collective unconscious? With the development in artificial intelligence towards greater complexity, do you think it might be possible that an AI in the future could tune in or resonate with the universal consciousness so that it can, quote, become conscious? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And I because of what we know right now, I don't think, you can answer this question scientifically. So you can have your opinion. My opinion is yes, consciousness, the global unconscious consciousness is a force of nature. And there is no reason, like I showed in my first slide, like we're not special. I don't believe humans are special. If consciousness is a force of nature, it can be tapped, by other things in nature, and that could involve in artificial intelligence, or maybe not. Maybe you need some things with chemical reactions. You need a biochemical system to interact with it because of its specific properties. So maybe silicon can't interact with the consciousness field, but maybe it can. I don't think we can say. So yeah, this is more a matter of opinion. I don't think, yeah, we have, any scientific proof of either that this could be possible or not possible at this point.
Right, that's to be determined, right, as we go on. So Stuart is asking, how can we reconcile that our brains most likely are not capable of ever understanding the universe, including consciousness? Do we need a whole new paradigm of discovery that's not science-based?
Well, so I mean, there's a whole new paradigm that's not science-based. So science, I mean, a lot of people see science as, the religion of science, but science doesn't tell you. Science is just a method. It just tells you, you have a model, you test the model, you either say the model is valid or the model isn't valid. The model can be about anything. There's nothing that prevents you to do a model of consciousness or how it interacts with the world. So yeah, you can set up some theory that's not scientific, but you won't be able to prove whether it's true or not. If you want to prove whether it's true or not, you have to go with the scientific paradigm and set up your hypothesis and either try to prove these are true, or if you have model, trying to invalidate your model, whatever the model might be. So IONS, we're focused on using the scientific method and really going beyond the dogma that, oh, you can only do science. This is pseudoscience. Nothing is pseudoscience if you have the right method and the right statistics and the right approach. If you do things rigorously, you can't do pseudoscience. You can study any question you want.
Great. Any question? I think, remember Cassie saying there's no unscientific topic, just unscientific method. So if we bring the method into
exactly, yeah, there's questions which are not answerable. Like, for example, in physics, a lot of the hypotheses about the multiverse, are based on physicists twinkling, with equations here, equations there, etc. And a lot of the things they come up with, is not provable. So then you could say, well, if it cannot be proven, it's probably unscientific, because you can't really, you have an hypothesis, but you can't possibly invalidate it, because validating it would violate the laws of physics. You can't see beyond our universe because, you can't go faster than the speed of light, for example. So then, yes, that's an unscientific model because it cannot be proven. So it's more becomes philosophical. And so that's what the Big C contest is about. So it's not about, so we'll ask people not to just like, okay, give us your theory of consciousness. We ask us, give us practical experiments we can do to show that, Big C is real. And that's how we're going to judge the different proposal. And the proposal which is the most promising, okay, this experiment can be done, it doesn't mean they have to do the experiment before they submit the proposal. The experiment is doable with our current technology. We also want, experiment to be done. Oh, you have to go to a different galaxy and then you can do this experiment. It needs to be able to be done right now. And if that's the case, even though, it might take a couple of millions of dollars to do, we'll still probably award the prize to that experiment just because it's the most promising to show that, yeah, we're more than our brain.
Great. And E. Bowden is asking, how is the work of mediums who communicate with those in the spirit realm or spirit related to little c and big C consciousness?
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about a little bit in my presentation. So you have two ways of approaching mediumship and channeling. Either you believe that you're communicating with spirits, or you believe like it's another phenomena, you're tapping into the global unconscious, or it's not real. So these three hypotheses. So when I do the experiments, I assume either yeah, there's a spirit world, or, it's the global unconscious. So there's something abnormal. So I don't make any assumption about that. But we have looked at the other, if there is a spirit world, how would it look? And there we said, we actually published, we're in the process of publishing a paper on survival of consciousness, because different things could survive. Does your personality survive, or just your feeling of being, and you just lose all your memories? Or, so there's we set up 5 different degrees, and also what are the different experiments that, would go into that. Most people believe that, so we ask a panel of scientists, which would be the most convincing experiment for you for survival of some level of consciousness? And most people answered out of body experience, where you could potentially see from, you could potentially things you would not be able to see from your body's perspective. So like they say, you're lying down and something is hidden from you, and you have an out-of-body experience, and then you're able to see that. And these experiments has been tried, have not been very successful so far, but there hasn't been a lot of experiment. But that's what people say would be the most convincing in terms of spirit world being real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All the experiments that are possible to be tried really give validity to what many people have experienced. So, yeah. Yeah. Bill is asking, please give your perspective on the difference between thinking or rational intellect and quote awareness, where one knows something that they know but cannot explain with their rational intellect how they know it. Aren't these two different aspects of awareness?
Yeah, there's so basically it's the origin of thoughts. You have some thoughts are true, and then you have some thoughts where just something pops up in your mind, or rational, you're trying to solve a problem. And I actually have a book coming out soon on where do thoughts come from. And I think there's many different potential origins, and there's different types of thoughts. Some are probably much more coupled with the brain. Everything that's mechanical or problem solving is probably very tightly coupled with the brain, and everything that's more intuition based, could be potentially due to some known local consciousness phenomena.
Right. We'll definitely look forward to that book to hear more. And yeah, what about the, foundation of ions here with Edgar Mitchell having that inner knowing, that noetic knowing that was beyond, the rational thought. So I love that you're writing about the origin of thought. Where does that come from in the different levels? So that's really great. Love it. We've got Michael saying, is consciousness a waveform, a particle, or both?
Well, I don't think we know. I mean, there's things we know, for example, our particle conscious, this is like panpsychism. Everything is conscious, so particle could be conscious. And if particles, and this would be a very long discussion. We actually had some webinar on that previously on some models of consciousness. But these particles of conscious, these particles are elementary. In a sense, elementary means the mathematical formulation, and within the mathematical formulation we cannot give them an additional property, conscious, not conscious, or level of consciousness. So they would be either fully conscious, everybody would be fully conscious, or fully non-conscious. So, there is constraint, we can impose just because of the mathematical formulation we know. And also, if particles are conscious, they probably cannot have a causal effect on the world, because they cannot be a property of a new property of particles that changes, basically. Unless there's new physics we don't understand. But with it, what we understand of particle, this is how this would work. What's more promising is consciousness could be coupled maybe with the what we call the energy of the vacuum, so empty space, because it doesn't have the same constraints. And so I was and we had Joan Kepler, which was presenting a model like this, like last year on our webinar, of how consciousness could be originating or coupled with the vacuum space, the energy, what we call the energy of the vacuum. So if you go in empty space, there is no such thing as empty space anywhere in the universe. Empty space doesn't exist. According to quantum mechanics, particles will sprout out of nothing, and this is called the energy of the vacuum. And so in this theory, that's, you know, where how consciousness could be coupled, you know, with what we know of existing physics. And I think also it's you have lots of scientists, you tell them, oh, you know, non-local effect of consciousness, and then the answer is, and that's the common answer we get is, oh, pigs don't fly, you know, and so it can't be real because pigs don't fly. And the answer is that, you know, like when we discovered electricity, you know, it's like if you look back in the 1500s, electricity was a very small part of people's life. You know, they were not interacting with electricity at all. And if you were telling them, oh, you can do all this crazy thing with electricity, they said, well, it's impossible. Just because, you know, they didn't have the tools and technology to tap into it. So it might be the same thing for us, is like, even though it's we can't really tap into the consciousness field right now, it doesn't mean we won't be able to do it in a more direct way in the future. And it's not going to invalidate everything in physics that we know. It's just going to, you know, put it at a notch higher. Like relativity, for example, didn't invalidate Newton mechanics. You know, it just give it some more perspective. At high energy, this is what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a few questions coming in about how many people, someone's asking how many people or institutions are actually studying this, and several other people mentioning different theories. What's your sense of how many people and institutions are really interested in this big question of consciousness?
I think so there is, so the big question of consciousness, there is many institutions around the world which are interested in that. I would say probably more than 50, but that's all within the realm of neuroscience. And even though they do touch on, okay, the feeling of being, where does this come from, and they try to explain it, most often it's a reductionist explanation, or it's just an epiphenomenon. So that's, you know, what I showed in my slides. So there is lots of institutions studying, you know, where does consciousness come from, but very often it's it's epiphenomenon of the brain. About the institution that study non-local consciousness, there's very few. IONS is the biggest in the world, just by number of scientists. There's no other place where you have like we're like 5 scientists on team studying these specific questions. You have a couple of people spread out, you know, in the US, a couple of University of Virginia, couples in the UK, France, Germany, but, you know, they're very isolated. So in terms of institution, there is not such thing as an institution that studies this phenomena. And it's not done in academia, especially in the US, for political reasons. There's many, political reasons why people don't do that. They don't want to ruin their careers, and then journals won't publish them because of reputation issues. So it's just a whole sets of reasons why it's very hard to study these questions from science politics perspective.
Right, great. And hopefully making that easier and easier for new people to come into this field, including that prize that was launching. So it's hard to believe, but we're almost at the top of the hour. So I do want to make just a couple announcements and then circle back to you, Arnaud, for your final closing thoughts on the nature of consciousness. And yeah, thank you everyone for participating, for bringing your great questions and comments, and definitely opens up to many different topics when we begin talking about the nature of consciousness. So my quick announcement is just that we'll be back next week, November 18th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for our next webinar with ION scientist Dr. Garrett Yount and his special guest, Dr. Shelley Evans. And they will be talking about one of the most surprising outcomes they observed in their research, which is the presence of non-physical beings participating in energy medicine sessions. So we hope to see you there next week. And before we turn it back to Arnaud, I'd like to just mention that these free programs, as well as our scientific research, are made possible with the generous gifts from our members and donors. So as always, huge thank you for your participation in the mission of IONS, whether it be just participating in these conversations, donating so that we can make this research possible. So we couldn't do it without you, truly. Thank you so much. And if you have enjoyed today's offering, we invite you to go to noetic.org/give to make a special gift or become a member today. So thanks again, everyone. And Arnaud, so just closing thoughts on this topic after the presentation and the Q&A. What do you want to leave us with here today?
Well, I was just remembering of his anecdote where I was teaching in India on the neural correlates of consciousness about 20 years ago. And I was in the train traveling, because you travel on the train in India. And I was with an engineer in the train, and I was explaining him what I was doing and studying, non-local phenomena of consciousness. And what he told me is, you don't need to go that far. The fact that in the Indian culture, the cow gives milk, to the cow. The fact the cow gives milk is a miracle in itself. The fact, there is, anything, the mystery, of the world and being as existence, you don't have to go that far, or showing non-local phenomena. Like, you have the mystery right in front of your eyes. And yeah, so that's what I want to leave, people with.
We've got the mystery right in front of our eyes. I love that. I love that. So thank you so much, Arnaud. Thank you again for everyone who participated. And we're looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much, and bye for now.